This message comes from NPR sponsor Sony Pictures Classics, presenting Between the Temples, a new comedy starring Jason Schwartzman as a cantor losing his voice and his faith when his grade school music teacher becomes his new bat mitzvah student, now playing only in theaters.
Hey there. So for all of you who are excited about the Smackdown, don't you worry. We've got a lot of special ones lined up, and we'll get back to it next week. But we're pausing because there's a birthday we have to celebrate. It's turning 21. It can drink, but it is also a drink. The pumpkin spice latte. To celebrate its 21st birthday, I'm bringing you a special episode from last year, a look back at how pumpkin spice became ubiquitous. So, without further ado, let's go back. Today, I'm headed to meet Liam, our producer, to have my very first pumpkin spice latte. I've never had one in my life. You're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luse. And this particular day wasn't just a momentous occasion for me, but for the pumpkin spice latte too. The drink is celebrating its 20th birthday this year, and we weren't the only ones making the pilgrimage on its drop day. The PSL has plenty of diehard fans. So how long have you been planning on coming to Starbucks to hit the pumpkin spice drop?
We put this on our calendars like a week ago.
Okay, so I'm wondering, how did y'all know about this a week ago? Because Liam and I just found out yesterday.
It was on the DL on Instagram. Like, people were mentioning it in the comments.
It's incredibly popular. And while Starbucks isn't the only pumpkin spice game in town, food trend forecaster and founder of Culinary Tides, Suzy Badaracco, says Starbucks did bring it on the scene in 2003.
I don't know that they realized the phenomenon they were about to create.
Since the launch, Starbucks has sold hundreds of millions of pumpkin spice lattes, and it's still a strong moneymaker. Last year's PSL drop kicked off the biggest sales week in the company's history. I'll be honest, I felt conflicted about going into Starbucks to buy a PSL for this. For one, I think almost all coffee tastes like burnt beans. For two, the corporation's long dealt with accusations of mistreatment from its workers. But Suzy says the pumpkin spice phenomenon is so big, it's not something most consumers might think about.
People are disassociating pumpkin pie spice lattes with the brand. They're like, but I want my pumpkin spice latte. They're kind of going to overlook Starbucks to be able to get the pumpkin pie spice latte.
It's almost like it empowers the consumer to kind of look the other way, or like whatever obstacle might keep them out of a Starbucks the rest of the year. In that season, it gets them to like push past.
Yes.
My producer, Liam, who came with me to get the PSL, says this is something he actually thinks about every year.
Okay, I definitely have shame about this, but I do drink one PSL every year. I don't think I step into a Starbucks otherwise, but this trend has a hold on me. I can't explain it.
And me, I like pumpkin spice in other things, but I'd never had a PSL until now.
All right, we ready?
I'm ready.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, okay. I totally get it.
Okay.
It tastes sweet. Like it's like not really so much a pumpkin-y flavor as like a warm spice flavor. Does that make sense?
Listen, this hits on like a cold fall day when you're about to go to like
I bet.
a park with a friend.
Yes, I was just gonna say. I was like, if you went on like a little Harry Met Sally walk,
Yeah.
little sweater,
Yeah, no,
or you went to like a
yeah.
yoga or Pilates class, and then you're like with your friend after having a little sip.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. But regardless of what I think, this drink and this flavor have a unique staying power in our culture, and also a unique reputation for being associated with the season, yes, but also basicness, or whiteness, or femininity. And while that may not be a draw for me, for others, it's maybe part of the appeal.
Part of PSL love is to just like embrace the basicness, so.
Deep down inside, I am a basic girl, you know?
So I sat down with Suzy to find out why pumpkin spice is so long-lasting and how food trends become cultural shorthand. Suzy, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you so much for having me.
How long have you been tracking food trends?
22 years.
22 years. Okay, so you've seen the full arc, the full pumpkin spice arc.
Yeah, absolutely.
My producer kept your background a secret from me because he wanted it to be a surprise. But he tells me it's really interesting.
My background is military intelligence and chaos theory. Before I got into food, I was a criminalist.
What?
Yeah, so I did crime scenes, serial killers. So when I stopped stepping over dead bodies, I naturally went to culinary school. So I am a certified chef.
I'm still stuck at the serial killer crime scene to culinary school pipeline, but maybe this is just a well-trod path that I don't have awareness of.
They're all patterns. It's all the same. So that's why I say instead of tracking serial killers, now I track cereal bars.
Okay, so I want to back up a little bit and kind of give the listener a clearer idea of how pumpkin spice can be embodied. Like if pumpkin spice was a person, it had a personality, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. So let's say you had a party and you invited pumpkin pie spice to your party as a guest. She would bring you a lovely bottle of wine. She would make sure everybody's having a good time. She would check on the playlist and she'd probably stay afterwards and help you clean up.
Sounds like a good bestie.
Exactly. There's nothing offensive about her. Cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, cloves. There's no single spice in her blend that's polarizing, right? She doesn't have mustard. She doesn't have licorice. Every single piece of her blend, there's a great affinity towards all of them.
When did you get the inkling that pumpkin spice lattes were starting to become really popular?
Pumpkin pie spice in general has been around for decades and decades and decades. So what Starbucks did in 2003 was it championed it jumping track from pie or dessert to beverage. But things have helped it keep going, not just Starbucks. So when we hit the recession of 2008, let's say, that renewed it again because it got tied to nostalgia. It got tied to recessionary looking back, wanting to feel good, getting through a recession.
In so many ways you described, there's long been an organic interest in pumpkin spice, or initially there was an organic interest in pumpkin spice as a flavor. But in what ways did Starbucks help to manufacture the trend of pumpkin spice?
They led with nostalgia, people having a good time, comforting quiet moments with your coffee. It was a psychological reward. That's what they positioned it as. This is a reward for you. It's something special just for you and the season.
This sounds like more narrative forward.
Exactly. They led with the season. They led with, ties to the holiday. They didn't overtly champion pumpkin pie spice itself. They tap into your childhood and your good memories. So that's how they did it.
Coming up, Suzy on why food trends garner so much meaning. Stick around. Is there any danger for things or food items to become too trendy? Like, do they reach a saturation point where people are like, oh, I'm sick of this?
Not the way this one's grown up. There are some trends that are we call them, it's a media darling. Like it's all over the media. Like remember cronuts, croissants and donuts from years ago?
I had one.
All of America may have heard of it, right? But you don't actually eat it or buy it. You have no intention to go to New York City and stand in line of 200 people and get a cronut. That's never going to happen. And you have no interest in doing it. So pumpkin pie spice is not like that. She's a media darling and she walks the walk. She actually has gone into everything and everybody accepts her. So in her life cycle, her little lifestyle, how she's led her life since 2003 through 2008, et cetera, she's constantly reinvented herself. So you can't kill her because you can't catch her.
Hold on. You're blowing my mind right now. If you can't kill her, you can't catch her. Like, I'm trying to get clear on this. What do you mean when you say that?
If she was stagnant and just stayed in coffee and never moved anywhere else, we'd be over this in a year. That's why she's been able to move into yogurt. And now she's in smoothies. And then she'll go to ice cream. And then she'll be savory. Many states now have cannabis is legal, right? Well, where is pumpkin pie spice going now? Cannabis, gummy, right? Brownies. edibles. So little pumpkin pie spice just moves right in. I'm kind of jealous of her, actually.
Oh my gosh.
So she shows up with a different party dress. Even in Starbucks, they have little spin-offs every year on what they're doing with the pumpkin pie spice, right? They might put it into a cold brew, right? They might put it into extra foam. So her party dress changes every year, but you still recognize her. So she reinvents herself sort of like Madonna.
But she's maybe not quite so edgy.
Yeah, she's still very approachable. That's her shtick.
I'd say she's less Madonna perhaps and more Taylor Swift.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
That's so interesting, especially that you personified so many of these foods. But obviously, we're having a conversation from like the average American palate, right?
Yeah.
Our standard American diet is kind of like a product of like our marketing and what actually feasibly grows in the United States very readily. It makes sense that like a spice blend based around the use of pumpkin, which plays nicely with corn and tomatoes and beans and rice, it makes a lot of sense then that that spice blend would also kind of fold easily into other American dishes and other American cuisine as opposed to, say, an ingredient like quinoa, which is not exactly like the same kind of agricultural ingredient fit.
Yeah, exactly. And also, so trends, they can have allies with other trends. Pumpkin pie spice, it ties to historical and regional flavor trends. It marries well with heritage meat trends like bison, rabbit, duck. It ties to the trend of heirloom vegetables, like you just mentioned. It ties to the trend of vegetables that moved into the bar and cocktail scene. Now she can move into the bar and cocktail scene. She ties obviously to the whole dessert category, not just pie, but quick breads, etc. So she has many, many, many allies. She has lots and lots of friends on the playground that she can flip between.
You've mentioned that for many people, pumpkin spice evokes nostalgia. And there's memories, experiences, and feelings associated with it. Pumpkin spice lattes aren't really just pumpkin spice lattes. They're associated with fall, with femininity, with whiteness even. You know, obviously people called them basic, you know, back when people were still calling things basic. Like pumpkin spice was like the most basic thing that you could, you know, drink or whatever. But I'm wondering, like, how do food trends gather those kinds of signifiers? Like, how do they become shorthand?
One, she kind of did it to herself, but Starbucks certainly didn't help the situation. Who is going to Starbucks? Rich white people. That's part of it. Also, if you think of pumpkin pie spice, it's an American holiday from hundreds of years ago. It's not an African American centered holiday. It's not a Mexican American centered holiday. Do you know what I mean? It's the Pilgrims who are white.
Also, even within my family, which we always celebrated Thanksgiving, we never ate pumpkin pie. I've only ever eaten pumpkin pie outside of my home. I grew up eating sweet potato pie.
Yeah.
So that idea of nostalgia and connecting to history further associates it with whiteness.
And you mentioned femininity, and who makes the pumpkin pie? The mom, the grandmother. It's the female of the house. Traditionally, historically, that makes that pie on that holiday. That's who we picture in the kitchen historically. So nostalgia is not comfort. Nostalgia ties something to a time and place in history, and nostalgia evokes an emotion and a memory. So nostalgia is much more complex than comfort. So emotionally, that's why we connect it, because of the history of it, with female.
Thinking about food trends, I imagine that there are some people out there that think that they're pretty silly. Why do you think food trends matter? Like, what do they mean to us culturally?
A flavor trend or a food trend or a cuisine trend, it is calming, and you can watch it unfold, and you can read about it, and you can go to a restaurant and partake. You could go to the grocery store and partake. You can go on TikTok or whatever and find it there. And so in a world that upends always, a trend is something kind of calming that you can refocus even for a moment. It's a little bit of a distraction. It's one way I can kind of control one thing in my life by partaking or criticizing it, right? There's also control in hating a trend and criticizing it.
It sounds like, in a way, like a food trend can be an anchor in a certain way. If you like it or you enjoy it, it gives you something to attach to. But also, it kind of gives you something as well if you don't like the trend.
It works both ways. Yeah.
Suzy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to food trend forecaster Suzy Badaracco. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Placzek.
Our executive producer is
Jasmine Romero.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luse. Talk soon.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Charles Schwab with their original podcast, Choiceology. Hosted by Katie Milkman, an award-winning behavioral scientist and author of the best-selling book How to Change. Choiceology is a show about the psychology and economics behind people's decisions. Hear true stories from Nobel laureates, historians, authors, athletes, and more about why people do the things they do. Download the latest episode and subscribe at schwab.com/podcast or wherever you listen.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Capella University. Capella's programs teach skills relevant to your career so you can apply what you learn right away. See how Capella can make a difference in your life at capella.edu.